What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Andre, and I know we took a week off and we ain't saying nothing, and that's on us. We apologize. We're just kind of figuring out what to do for the future of this podcast now that the NFL draft is done. WrestleMania is beyond us, and I'll explain more of that towards the end of the video. But Ryan and I, we had a not a long conversation, but we talked for several minutes about what the future of the pod would look like going into the summer. With not a lot of sports going on, or what would be not a lot of sports going on during that time. So stick around to the end and find out what the future of the pod will be like. But that's till then. Right now, we got some sports news to talk about, so let's get into it. So before we get into the latest NFL news, yes, I am in the back of my car again. Listen, when you miss two pods the last week, you got to come up with some. So desperate times call for desperate measures. So I'm in a parking lot somewhere. You got to do what you got to do. And kind of tying in, missing the pods and all that, tying in that topic. We did not quit. Ryan and I, we just kind of talked about what the future would look like for the podcast, for what we do throughout the summer. Now that as we close in on the Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA playoffs, and by the time we get to June, it'll be the Stanley Cup final and the NBA finals. So we just kind of talked about the future of the pod. So stick around to the end of the video for that. And the grind don't stop. We're not really changing much, but there's gonna be some changes. And like I said, we'll get there when we get there, closer to the end of this video. But before we get there, we got to get into the latest sports news. So let's get into it. So in the NFL, George Pickens gets traded from Pittsburgh to Dallas, along with some draft picks for next year in 2027. And, I think this is a bigger win, obviously, for Dallas. They obviously need to bolster up their offense. Not so much, but, it's nice to have another wide receiver superstar in George Pickens. Listen, it's not like he wasn't bad in Pittsburgh, but, just the production that he's shown in Pittsburgh, during his tenure there, it was on and off. Sometimes he'd have a good game, sometimes he just will play like shit. So I don't know if Pittsburgh wanted to deal with that anymore and all that, but good for Dallas for wanting to make the move. In theory, they shouldn't struggle offensively this season. I mean, you still have CeeDee Lamb, you have Michael Gallup. Now you're adding George Pickens, and you have Dak Prescott at the quarterback. I know he's coming off injury as well, so we'll see how he responds coming into the season, and even just coming into training camp. So it should be a very, very interesting season for Dallas, as it always is every year. Every Cowboys fan I hear, or every Cowboys fan that I know, say that it's going to be their year. Who knows? It probably won't be their year. You still got other teams like the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Bills that you still got to beat. So, good for Dallas for getting another superstar on their team. And like I said, they shouldn't struggle offensively this season. Adding in George Pickens, and for the Steelers, I think this is more of a retooling type of situation. You just traded Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and now you traded George Pickens. So, I don't know if they're going younger offensively. It seems like it's headed that way. It's looking that way. I know they just drafted Will Howard from the draft, Ohio State. They added in Jack Sawyer too from Ohio State on the defensive end. So, it's going to be I mean, I feel like every Steelers season is going to be interesting because you don't know if they're going to make the playoffs or not nowadays. So, but Mike Tomlin always finds a way. He always finds a way to at least be at a 500 record. 500. At a .500 percentage record. So, and somehow sneak into the playoffs. Nowadays. So, um, maybe Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers. Who knows? We haven't heard nothing from Aaron Rodgers since since Russell Wilson got traded. We haven't heard him since the draft. So, um, will Aaron Rodgers play for the Steelers? We probably won't know till the summer, probably in the next month or two. So, um, it's most likely he's going to head there anyway. So we're just waiting on him to make the announcement, or waiting on Pittsburgh to make that announcement. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when Aaron Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh. So from the gridiron, from the football field to the hockey rink, the Stanley Cup Playoffs, like I said, it's my favorite time of the year. The first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs just commenced, and I mean, not a lot of surprises from the first round in terms of what teams moved on. But just to recap the first round, my Golden Knights defeated the Minnesota Wild in 6 games. It was very tough for no reason. I don't think Vegas should have made it that tough on themselves to go to 6 games, but currently they're down 1-0 against Edmonton, and they play tonight, Thursday, May 8th, as of this recording. So, um, you know, they just got to stay consistent, man. They got to stay consistent. And, they were up 2-0 in game 1 on Tuesday night against Edmonton, and Edmonton came back, and, they scored 3 unanswered in the third, and, Vegas really shot themselves in the foot. So, and especially against Edmonton, right? And, they faced them before. They faced them the year they won the cup. So, like I said, I know this team. I've watched them throughout the years that they've existed in the NHL. So they should be able to bounce back, right? They should be able to bounce back. Will they actually do it? I don't know. They kind of look sloppy. And it's not to say that I don't have confidence in them, but you got to stay consistent, especially against these Oilers players, because Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are one thing, but um, maybe that added depth that they've added on this offseason, it's kind of bothering him a little bit. Evander Kane's coming off of injury as well too, and John Klingberg coming off of injury, coming into the playoff series. So, they might start to heat up at some point. But for Vegas, you just got to be able to stay consistent. And then we saw also in the Western Conference in the first round, the Stars and the Avalanche, one of the more intriguing storylines, one of the more intriguing series in the first round. That within itself was a hell of a series, and I knew it'd go long. I didn't think it would go to 7, honestly, but I knew it'd be a longer series. But man, Mikko Rantanen, he got a chip on his shoulder, man. He got a chip on his shoulder for real. I mean, Game 7, scores a hat trick against his former team to help secure the series for the Stars, and they just played last night, Wednesday, May 7th, against the Jets, their first game in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and Mikko Rantanen again, another hat trick. And I mean, if Dallas keeps playing like this, man, I'm like I said, I'm a Golden Knights fan, but listen, Dallas, what I'm gonna say this: when Vegas was on their quest for their first Stanley Cup, they were missing another superstar on their team, and that was Jack Eichel. And when they got Jack Eichel, his first year they didn't make the postseason, but when they made the postseason the year after, Jack Eichel was a consummate favorite as the playoffs went on, as the postseason went on, and he was like second or third favorite in the betting odds to win the Conn Smythe Award. But for Dallas, Mikko Rantanen might be their Jack Eichel, and like I said, if they keep playing like this, they can get back to the Stanley Cup final and win. and win it this time. And like I said, a few weeks ago when a few days after the trade happened, when the Stars got Mikko Rantanen, you're paying him 8 years, or you're paying him roughly $12 million for the next 8 years. You got to win now, and they have a really good case to win now. Mikko Rantanen, man, and now they got Jason Robertson back. Miro Heiskanen is supposed to come back at some point in this series against the Jets, so they're getting their guys back and they're starting to get healthy again. So it's a scary team over there in Dallas. So, but yeah, I mean that series by itself, Colorado really should have won the series, but Dallas is just they're resilient and they get on your ass on both the offense and defense. So that was a fun series, and it looks like you know um, it looks like they might easily pass Winnipeg. Um, who knows? Who knows? The Oilers, for the fourth year in a row, beat the Los Angeles Kings in 6 games. I'm not really surprised. I did say the Kings would win the series in 6 games, but the Oilers, man, you can never bet. You can't ever go against Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. You just can't. But I think also throughout that series, the Kings were the more dominant team, and I think there was a challenge. If I remember correctly, there was a challenge that Jim Hilliard, I think that's his last name, but the Kings head coach, he challenged I think it was goaltender interference in game 3 of that series, and it didn't go their way, and that really changed the trajectory of that series. Because if they didn't challenge that call, they might have had a chance to win that series. So, but nonetheless, the Oilers again in 6 games, they beat the Kings, and like I said, they play against the Golden Knights, and this team, they know how to come back from deficits, and they showed it again. On Tuesday night against the Golden Knights, they were down 2-0. Corey Perry got one at the end of the first period, or closer to the end of the first period, and then they held the Knights to one shot on goal in the second period, and like I said, three unanswered goals in the third period. So this Oilers team, they're not going to give up either, man. They're not going to give up. And then obviously the Jets and the Blues, they went to 7 games, which honestly I was surprised. I thought the Jets would handle this Blues teams easily, but the Blues, they stayed in there, and for a while you thought they would win Game 7, and the Jets, man, that was crazy, crazy, crazy last 2 minutes of regulation in that game of Game 7, and I'll that overtime period. I mean, I listen. The Jets defensively, they're a big team, and I don't know if I know they have guys injured. Morrissey's out, Shifley's out. Um, during the at least as of May 8th, they didn't play in Game 1 against the Stars in the second round, so you lose some key guys there, and I don't know if they're just tired from that series, because it was physical. It was very brutal, and there were a lot of hits being thrown both ways. So, Connor Hellebuyck can only do so much on his end to kind of hold it down for the team. But, for the Jets, uh, you can only be physical for so long before it bites you back in the ass. So, um, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and I'll give out what my predictions are for the second round in a little bit, but for the Jets, you gotta find a way to still be physical, but also find ways to score goals, right? And they're capable of doing it. It's just they gotta find a way. They have to be able to find a way. They found a way against the Blues, right? Um, but Dallas is a different beast. They're not St. Louis. they have more star power over there, and you're the Jets. You gotta find a way to defend their top two lines and even their depth players as well in the bottom six. So real quickly, just to kind of go over the Eastern Conference side of the first round series matchups for the Stanley Cup playoffs. We saw the Capitals beat the Canadiens in 6 games, which I'm not really surprised. Um, but I think the Canadians really gave a run for their money. It's in some portions of that series. You know, they've they've shown a reason why they should compete. For at least a playoff spot. And after the Four Nations Face-Off tournament, they were like 15-5-2, finishing out the regular season, and you know they they make a legitimate case of being a playoff contender, right? If they stay healthy and if they build that team the right way around their younger talent, Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Lane Hudson, who was slated to be the rookie of the year this season, you know, they're set up to be successful. And um, I think it's just the youth that really got to them at the end of the day. And for Washington having that much more playoff experience in recent years than the Canadians, I think it's what won them the series. So, but that first game against Carolina 2 nights ago, like I said, I'll give them my picks, in a little bit, but Carolina, man, they're a younger team, right? They're a younger team. They're more experienced than the Canadians. So, we'll see how that goes because it was a close game. I mean, they went to overtime. So, uh, we'll see what happens in that series. Then we see the Hurricanes beat the Devils in 5 games, which came to no surprise. Just Carolina was a better team, and obviously the Devils lost Jack Hughes in the last half of the regular season to ACL injury. So hopefully they have that same fire going into next season, and whatever offseason moves they choose to make. Hopefully it benefits the team for another playoff run because it's nice to see teams like New Jersey and like the Canadians, teams that were in the bottom of the league or like close to the bottom of the league for a few years. It's nice to see them back in the playoffs, right? And you know, like a team like Detroit, right? They've been fighting for a wild card spot for like the last 2 seasons, 3 seasons. So to see a team like New Jersey, to get back to at least the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's a good thing for the organization. That means they're going in the right step with the roster they have. So, um, like I said, they should be able to compete. I mean, the East is wide open. Um, it's anybody's game, so New Jersey can still compete. And then we almost seen the Maple Leafs do it again. We almost saw them choke another first round series, up 3-0 against the Ottawa Senators, and Ottawa won 2 games, but Maple Leafs finished them off in 6. So good for the Maple Leafs. And wow, they're currently up 2-0 and against Florida and in that second round series. So um if they I'd be surprised if it'd be a sweep, but they look really good. I mean, they're up 2-0 against the defending champs. It's just really funny. I was gonna bet Ottawa to win the series for like plus 400 something, but I didn't want to do it because it probably wasn't gonna happen. But it still would have been a nice bet to follow to sweat it out. But I mean, Ottawa gave them a run for their money. I mean, there's any team that gave another team a run for their money, it was Ottawa. I mean, they almost forced a game 7. Um, but I mean, this Maple Leafs team, like I said, before, they should be able to make it to the final. I mean, there's a path. And obviously, they're well on track to make it to the final, right? If they keep playing the way they do, or if they keep playing the way they have been so far against Florida. So it's just funny to see the Maple Leafs almost choking another first round series because wow, last year they lost against the Bruins in 7 in overtime. I took the Bruins live in overtime, and you know I mean, it was just reminiscent of last year's final, right? When Edmonton made that comeback and forced Game 7 against Florida. So, uh, Toronto, such a talented team, but finds ways to lose games. Not so far against Florida though, so it's a good sign. And then speaking of Florida, the battle of Florida in the Sunshine Belt, Florida Panthers defeat their rivals Tampa Bay Lightning in 5 games. Um, and I'm not surprised, but I thought Tampa was going to be the better team coming into the series. But I mean, Florida, which is a bigger team, and Jake Gensel can only do so much, right? That first top two lines for Tampa can only do so much. But I think if you're a Tampa Bay fan, you shouldn't be too worried. I think this is the first full season with having Jake Gensel on, and you make it to the playoffs. So I think it's just more of a chemistry building thing. Um, you know, uh, I think more of a chemistry building thing. You maybe add a couple more, couple more upgrades in the offseason in terms of forwards, maybe even defensemen as well. Um, so kind of build up that chemistry in the offseason. You'll make another playoff run for sure. I don't see the Lightning not being in the playoffs next year or next season, I should say. But yeah, Florida, proved to be the better team. So, but they're getting their asses kicked, like I said, in the Toronto season, they're getting their asses kicked in the Toronto season, but they're getting their asses kicked so far in the Toronto series in the second round. So, defending champs down 2-0, gotta find a way to to get one back, um, to get one back on home ice. So on to my second round picks for the Stanley Cup playoffs. You can kind of already tell from some of the analysis I've given out from the first round recap. But we'll start in the Western Conference. Listen, I know the Golden Knights didn't have a good showing out in Game 1, and tonight of Thursday, May 8th, they're playing Game 2. So they got to come up big. Knowing this team, they'll make a push and they'll push back. They're gonna try to they're gonna really go for the win here. Not only one, they have to go for the win, but two, you got to prove that you are the top team in the Pacific Division, right? That you were there for a reason. So you can't be disrespected like that by the Oilers. But I'm going to be biased, like I did in the first round. Um, I have the Golden Knights beating the Oilers in 6 games. It could go to 7. I mean, there's just so much talent on both sides of both teams, and the last time both of these teams met each other, they went to 6 games. But I mean, this might go to 7, and it's gonna fucking scare me. But it is what it is. Like I said, talent on both sides. Eichel, Stone, for VGK, and McDavid and Draisaitl for the Oilers. So we'll see what happens, and it should be a very, very interesting series because this Oilers team this year is different. It's slightly different from 2 years ago. So, you know, I want to say I'm worried if they lose Game 2 by the time this is posted. I might start to get worried depending on how they play, but as of right now, I'm not worried. I think they'll be able to win Game 2, but if not, I'll start to worry. In the other Western Conference second round series, I do have the Stars to beat the Jets. I don't. I put them. I put the Stars to win in 5, but I think this can go to 6. I think if the Jets somehow get Scheifele back and Morrissey back during this series, I think I don't think it's going to go to 7, but I think it can go to 6. But I mean, from what we've seen from the Stars and just Mikko Rantanen by himself, I mean, Mikko Rantanen is carrying this team on his back so far. So, um, I think when you look at the Stars team, like I said earlier, they make a really good case to win the Stanley Cup final, or at least to make it back to the final. They're getting guys back, Robertson, Heiskanen, and someone was there. Robertson already came back, but Heiskanen's on, he's probably on his way back soon. So once they have their full lineup together with all their superstars, it's going to be a hard team to beat. Um, and I still don't believe in Ottinger. I can't get there with him. But the team in front of him is just as good. So that's why I have the Stars winning in 5. I mean, they're just a really sound defensive team, and that's what really pisses me off because you know I always say fuck Dallas, fuck the Dallas Stars, but you know I do it because I know they're good and I don't want them to win. But you give credit where credit is due, and I'm giving my credit to Dallas. So Dallas to win in at least 5 games, possibly 6. And then on the Eastern Conference side for the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, I have the Hurricanes winning against the Capitals, probably in 5. It could go to 6, but I think the Hurricanes again make this an easy series for themselves. I mean, we've seen it in game 1, right? They were the more physical team. They were down 1-0. They found a way to tie it, found a way to win in overtime, especially being on the road. Um, they're a younger team, but like I said, they have the playoff experience, right? They're not the Canadians, right? It's not like they've missed the playoffs for some time and then came back and then missed time again and then and then just come back after a few years. But this Carolina team analytically should make it to the final. I mean, they're a very, very gritty defensive team and they have a strong power play. So, you know, uh, they got stars there too, and nobody really talks about them. And that's honestly kind of disrespectful. I mean, you have Sebastian Aho, you have Andre Sveshnikov, um, you have Jordan Martinook, you have Brent Burns. You have a good goaltending tandem in Freddie Anderson and Peter. Oh my God, I don't know. Oh my God, I'm screwing up his name. Peter Kochekov. Um, so I think I don't see it going to 7. I'd be surprised if it goes to 7, but I do go see it 5 games. I'd be kind of surprised if it goes to 6, but I do see the Hurricanes winning in at least 5, possibly 6 if it even gets there. And then the Panthers and the Maple Leafs, I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. I do have the Panthers to win in 6, despite the Maple Leafs having a very strong 2-0 lead against the Panthers currently. No one expected the Maple Leafs to dominate the Panthers like this. You think the Panthers would put up a fight, and there's just no. It just seems like there's no fight in the Panthers, right? I mean, all these games are going over the goal totals. I think game 1, the goal total was set at 5.5. And now game 2, or I should say, before game 2 started, the goal total was set at 6.5, and it just got over. So I mean, both teams can score, and that's the problem for the Panthers because the Maple Leafs can also score with them. And I think the more surprising part is that the Panthers should be the more defensive team than the Maple Leafs, but it just seems like the Panthers just aren't playing their best defensive game right now, and that's the part that worries me. I think that's a part of what makes Panthers fans worried is that they're such a structured defensive team that they're not able to contain the Maple Leafs offense, right? And Bobrovsky hasn't been the best either, right? I mean, the goaltending hasn't been the best. Um, and Anthony Stolarz, I know is currently injured as of May 8th, and I don't think he's going to play in Game 3. Um, but I mean, Joseph Wall, it's not like he's a scrub. Like he's been good for the Maple Leafs. It's just that Stolarz it's just that Stolarz has been the better goaltender, um, and he's kind of shown why he's the Maple Leafs number 1 starter, goaltending starter. But Wall's a good backup, right? So for the Maple Leafs, they keep this offensive scoring going. They might win this in 5. if the Maple Leafs can keep this up, they might go to the conference final and they win the series in 5. But if Florida plays their game, if they get back to their if they're able to find their defensive structure again in their defensive game, I think they'll win in 6. I think they'll win the next 4 games. But it's going to be hard, as we've seen in these first 2 games. So honestly, very surprised. This is probably the more surprising series that I've seen so far in the second round. Um, but yeah, man, shout out Maple Leafs because y'all almost choked against the Ottawa Senators, and I think that put a chef on their shoulders for sure coming into this series. All right, there's a lot of hockey. There's probably a lot more than I thought I would talk about, but we're moving on from the hockey rink to the NBA hardwood court. We don't really talk about NBA much on here, but I've been keeping up with the playoffs. And before we even get to the second round, to my second round picks for what's going on right now in those playoffs. I mean, the first round was very, very entertaining on both conferences. But just to kind of recap what's happened in the first round in the NBA playoffs, everybody knows the meme of Shannon Sharp, UFC, WWE, Royal Rumble, Lakers in 5, right? You know what I'm saying? We all know that meme, but it was the Timberwolves that beat the Lakers in 5. The Luka trade I think was just to help bolster that team, to kind of keep playoff, to give them, still good playoff positioning going into the postseason. I don't know. Who knows? In today's NBA's landscape, who knows if Luka's gonna stay? I don't know. He might find a way back to Dallas somehow. I don't know. But if this is somehow the last time we're gonna see Luka, it's been a fun ride. It was fun watching him in a Lakers jersey. It was really cool to see him, playing the purple and gold for a minute. If this is the only season he's going to play, but I don't think it will. But like I said, who knows? In today's NBA landscape, people come and go sometimes. So yeah, but the Timberwolves are just a younger team. They obviously had, you could just see the on-court chemistry was just a lot better than the Lakers. And for the most part, the Lakers had, this has probably been one of their better seasons in a while, right? Since the last time they won the NBA Finals. So, um, you know, whatever happens with LeBron going into the offseason, who knows? He hasn't confirmed if he's playing another season. I honestly feel like he's going to retire this offseason. I don't know if he's going to have like a retirement season or, go on one last ride or whatever. So, but knowing LeBron, he probably will, but I don't see it happening. He's coming off an MCL sprain, his first in his career. So, I think it's time to hang up the shoes, man. Right? If you want to go on a retirement season run, go for it. But I, just don't expect a lot. You know what I mean? But for the Timberwolves, they got a shot. They got a shot at going to the finals. I mean, they had they had a shot last year, and they have another shot this year. Especially with Steph Curry being out currently, with that hamstring injury. The Timberwolves should be able to get past the Warriors. When and I'll explain more when I give them my second round pick. So, UFC, WWE, Royal Rumble, Timberwolves in 5. And then speaking of the Warriors, they were forced to 7 games against the Rockets. I don't know if I was really surprised. I didn't want to count out Steph Curry. You can never count out Steph Curry if he's playing, right? If Curry's playing, the Warriors have a chance. And they did have that chance, right? They won in 7 games against the Rockets, but for a while there, you just thought the Rockets would make a good case to beat the Warriors. But it was a series I didn't really keep up with, but it was very entertaining to keep. It was very entertaining to watch from like highlights and different analysis from different people. Fred VanVleet seems to be a good fit for the Rockets team. What Ime Udoka has done for that team as well as the head coach. This team is proven to make a stand for the playoffs every year. So I expect nothing less than to at least compete for the playoffs for the Rockets, moving forward. So, they have a really good team, right? You have Sengun there, at the 4 or 5 position, and you know, you just bring in more and more talent, right? Whether that's through the draft, whether that's during whether that's offseason moves in the free agency market. But I think the Rockets will have a I think they'll have a bright future. I mean, I think they'll kind of go on like their mid 2000s run, with going to the playoffs consistently, right? And we haven't really seen that since Tracy McGrady, Yao Ming, right? Those teams. So, um, very bright future for the Rockets for sure. But the Warriors, Steph Curry, a very irrelevant series in the Thunder and the Grizzlies. Thunder swept them 4-0. I Shea Alexander, who's probably going to win MVP this season, you know, just kind of led that team. But I know the Grizzlies lost Ja Morant too. But I think even if they had Ja on, on the team, I still think they get swept. Maybe they get one. Um, yeah, maybe they get one, maybe on the road in Oklahoma. But yeah, eh, you know, the Thunder, the best team in the league this season. So, you know, they made their reason. They've made multiple cases why they're the best team in the league throughout that series. That game one, that first game by itself. So nothing more to say about that series. And then we saw the Nuggets versus the Clippers, which honestly was one of the more interesting series in both sides, on either side, I should say. Um, 7-game series. It was probably one of the more interesting series in the first round, just because you didn't know if Kawhi or James Harden were going to stay healthy. But they managed to stay healthy, and we got a 7-game series out of that. So, um, as long as James Harden and Kawhi Leonard stay healthy, that Clippers team that as long as James Harden and Kawhi Leonard stay healthy, that Clippers team is making it to the playoffs. So, as long as they're playing, they're healthy, and you kind of, you know, maybe you make some offseason moves to kind of make a little upgrade to that team. They'll make it. They'll make it to the playoffs every year. To the NBA Finals, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how their team is comprised of, so we can talk about that. But they should be at least a playoff team, moving forward. And for the Nuggets, they're I don't know. I wouldn't say they're very fortunate to move on from that series. I feel like any of those two teams could have won, and they would have still have to face Oklahoma. So I don't know. I guess for the Nuggets, they were they just had a better game, right? They just had better games. They just had a better 4-game series, or and for the Nuggets, they just they found ways to win. So they found ways to win 4 games, even though they were forced to Game 7. So, but I mean, either of those teams could have won. You still would have had to face the Thunder in the second round. So, um, and I'll give out that pick later, but I will say I have the Thunder winning that series against the Nuggets. But like I said, the Nuggets found a way to win. We saw that in Game 1 against the Thunder, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And then on the Eastern Conference side, we see the Celtics beat the Magic in 5 games. Not really surprised there. Tatum, Brown, Derek White, right? Their bench, that whole Celtics bench, they came out to play, right? Drew Holiday, in the starting lineup, Al Horford. They just out they just outmatched the Magic. That's it. And you know, I guess for the Magic to get back to the playoffs is it's a really it's a good thing. It's a bright spot in their season. Obviously, you don't want to get eliminated, this early on in the playoffs, but it's a bright, it's a bright spot for the team. You have Paulo Banchero, he's been progressing well as a young player, so you kind of build around him. You make it back to the playoffs, you look really good during the regular season, we might talk about you being one of the top teams in the East. So we'll see what happens. And then we see the Knicks beat the Pistons in 6 games. I'm I'm not surprised that they beat the Pistons. I'm kind of surprised they went to 6 games. Um, but Cade Cunningham really came out and showed out. I think this is a really good platform for him to really showcase his talents and to prove why he was the number one pick and in the year that he got drafted. So you know, like a lot of teams that got eliminated, you build around Cade Cunningham, you have a chance to make it to the playoffs. And for the Pistons, this is probably the one of better. This is probably one of their better seasons in recent years, right? So you weren't at the bottom of the East, but you're in the middle. You're in the middle of the pack. So um, they make smart offseason moves. They can make it back to the playoffs, right? Probably not the best team in the East, but right where they are right now, like 4, 5, 6 seed. You could sustain that if you're the Pistons, right? Young team, got a young star in Cade Cunningham who really showed out in all those 6 games. So very, very, very exciting and very intriguing to see where the Pistons go from here. And then another sweep. See the Cavs beat the Heat. Not surprised. The Cavs were the top team in the East this year. Just outmatched them, outplayed them. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Defensive Player of the Year, right? Just outplayed them on both sides of the floor. For the Heat, I don't know where you go from here, but very fortunate to get out that play-in series round or that play-in tournament round against the Hawks, because almost lost that game for a second, but found a way to win that game and just to get swept in the playoffs. So sorry, Heat fans. And then the Pacers beating the Bucks. I can't say I was surprised. Um, Obviously for Damian Lillard, he was injured. He didn't play in game 1. Then he got injured again during the series. So it's like, well, he's probably not going to come back for next season, right? He tore his ACL. That sucks, man. And, people are saying this might be Giannis's last game as a Buck. Like, man, it was such a good team over there. And I think when they traded Chris Middleton away, I think that was just a telling sign of, yeah, they might make it to the playoffs, but they're not going to win anything. So, yeah, it sucks for what the Bucks went through that just this postseason, and even before coming into the season, right? Like you lose a really good defensive player in Chris Middleton, and I know you probably didn't produce a lot offensively, or sorry, I think they traded Chris Middleton during the season. It's one of those two, but nonetheless, I know he hasn't produced a lot in the offense, in recent, in these last couple of seasons for the Bucks, but he's still one of your best defensive players, and defense wins games. So where the Bucks go from here, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if Giannis leaves the team this year. So going on to my second round picks for the NBA playoffs, um, I said it earlier. The Timberwolves, I think, beat the Warriors. Now that Curry's out and we don't know when he's going to come back, so I have the Timberwolves. I put this in before Curry got injured. Um, I had the Timberwolves to beat the Warriors in 5. I think just like the Lakers series, I think they're a hungrier team. They're a younger team. The Warriors, they got they got a little young talent over there, but you got a player like Anthony Edwards on that team that can help lead that team to victory, to get them to a winning position, in game. Then you have guys like Julius Randle. You got a veteran Mike Conley. You have a very, very good defensive big in Rudy Gobert. It's just all there. The stars should be aligning for the Timberwolves in this series, especially with Curry out. And then I have the Thunder beating the Nuggets. I think this will be a long series. And then we have the Thunder and the Nuggets. Depending on how the Nuggets play throughout this entire series, this might be a long series. I see this going to 7 games. Like I said, depending on how Denver plays, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Thunder beat them in 6 games. But I do believe this will be a long series. I do see the Thunder coming out of it. Um, but it should be a very interesting one. We saw what happened in game 1 with the Thunder, or sorry, with the Nuggets winning game 1 in a close game. Aaron Gordon shooting the game winning 3-pointer to clinch game 1. And then we see game 2, just the Thunder putting on a statement win for the Thunder, saying, all right, game 1, you can have game 1, but we're coming back. And I'd love to see the Thunder and the Timberwolves face off in the conference finals. I think that would be a very fun series. I think that would be a very fun series to watch. That's something I definitely will tune into as a basketball fan. But I have the Thunder beating the Nuggets, and how many games? I have it at 7, but that kind of depends on how Denver plays throughout this entire series. And then we're going to finish this off with some F1, going from the hardwood to the streets to the racetrack, Formula One. Listen, man, I've been telling y'all for weeks, this is McLaren's year. They're going to strive for another constructors, and either Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri, they're going to gun for that F1 championship. This is probably, aside from last year, this is McLaren's best year that since I've started watching F1. This is probably McLaren's best year, best season. It's just really fun to see, where they come from, from the sprints to qualifiers to the actual race. I think McLaren, they're very what's the word I'm trying to look for? They're very concise. They're very strategic with how they position themselves in these qualifiers and going into the actual race. So, man, I just feel like McLaren's just going to dominate this year, this season, and they already are. I mean, the top 2 racers in the standings are Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, and Verstappen is in 3rd. So they're making a statement out here, man. They're making a statement out here, and I've been trying to tell y'all since March, this is their year. I'm gonna back them. I made the decision to back them from the beginning of the season up until now. And we just saw Oscar Piastri win 3 Grand Prix in a row. He just won the Miami Gardens Grand Prix. So domination, right? And then McLaren got a 1-2 finish in the Miami Gardens race, right? It was Piastri, it was Norris at the 1-2, and then George Russell again, podiums for 3rd. Man, I have nothing else to say. I'm just really amazed to see where McLaren's at right now. To kind of fight through so much adversity, before winning the constructors last year to get to this point. I mean, they worked their ass off, man, and kudos to them because they deserve it. Because Mighty Max has been dominating the sport for so many years. I think it's time for a new face for F1, and that could be Lando Norris. That could even be Oscar Piastri. If you hear aircon in my car running, you're not hearing things. My phone turned off because it got too hot in the car, and I didn't want to leave the aircon running while I was recording because I didn't know how long I was going to record for, and my mic died. So obviously, it probably didn't have enough charge, and I thought, I don't know, this whole outro is going to be weird. So bear with me here. I'm going to talk about the future of the pod real quick. Long story short, Ryan and I, we're not going to post as much as we usually do as the summer months come up, just because we're both probably going to be traveling. He's going to be out. I'm going to be out. And it's going to be hard for the both of us to get together during the summer months. And also, there's really not much going on in the summer sports-wise. We got the NBA Finals going on. We got the Stanley Cup Finals going on. The WNBA season starts at the end of May. F1 still going on, and obviously we got WWE that goes year round. The NFL season, right? The training camps, right? We start to hear more of those reports come out. So, um, depending on what happens throughout the summer months, we might make a pod here and there, but we won't post as much as we usually do from the podcast side of things. Now, on the social media side of things, we will probably be more active on the social media side. It's just right now, me working full time, Ryan working full time as well. It's hard to kind of it's kind of hard to come home from work and then you got to work on social media stuff for the pod, and and I know that's part of the grind, but my job takes a toll on me as well. So um you know that's why we're not as active on social media as we should be. But this summer we got some really great things planned out. We're gonna jump on the reactionary type trend type content, if that makes sense. Just reacting to like WWE stuff, sporting stuff, and the WNBA and both finals and the Stanley Cup final, and then in the NBA finals. Trying to do more of that stuff. We might do news across all. Well, we'll probably do more news across all arenas podcast. The Across All Arenas podcast, which is our main longer podcast. That will probably be on hold for a minute, just kind of depending on what's going on in the summer. There might be a load of UFC card that I might want to do for an episode. So we'll see how the summer months play out, but we should be more active during the summertime, social media wise. So, and on that front too, we'll probably focus on TikTok. We'll also post on Instagram as well, but mostly on the TikTok side because that's where we see the most engagement. So, and we always appreciate that from you guys as well. All the engagement, the likes, the comments, we see it all. And who knows, I might buy a Zach Edey shirt finally this summer. So, with that being said, we thank you guys so much for all the support. And until next time, whether that's the podcast form or social media, we'll see y'all when we see y'all. All right? Deuces.